Well, thank you. Today, I want to share with you the realization of a dream, the design and building of a camera to create panorama daguerreotypes inspired by Frederic Martens. I first saw a large single-plate panorama daguerreotype at the George Eastman Museum in 2001. Therese Mulligan, the curator at the time, had commissioned me to make a series of still-life daguerreotypes. I was free to select items from the image and technology collections for my compositions. I was drawn to include this incredible panorama of Paris made by Frederic Martens around 1845. The expanse of the panorama view inspired me to pursue this in my own work. The most common panorama daguerreotypes in the 19th century were made with multiple plates, as in this example of San Francisco by Sterling McIntyre in 1851. With the camera and materials available to me, I made this 5-plate view of Pittsburgh from Mount Washington in 2007. I prepared the plates at Mark Johnson's place, and together we made 7 attempts from this vantage point over 2 years' time. Most of them were failures due to the difficulty with sensitizing 5 plates to produce uniform exposure and tonality across the view. This experience caused me to long for a camera that could produce a panorama on a single plate, and my thoughts returned to Frederic Martens. Who was Frederic Martens, and why did he make such a camera? Born in Venice, Martens spent most of his life in Paris. When the daguerreotype was introduced, he was working for Leribours, the optician, instrument maker, and publisher. Martens was a skilled engraver and made several of the printing plates for Excursion Daguerrean. Published by Leribours, it was the first book with illustrations based on the daguerreotype. Martens made this spectacular view of Paris from the upper level of Leribours' studio at Pont-Neuf. I believe Martens was inspired to create panorama daguerreotypes because, as an accomplished landscape artist, he wanted to record all that he could see. The full extent of human vision in a landscape is roughly a 140-degree angle of view. Lenses in the 1840s could not capture the full sphere of human perception within their field of view. To achieve this, Martens created a unique camera where the daguerreotype was exposed while curved to match the focal length of the available lens. Cranking the geared handle rotated the lens from one side of the plate to the other. The camera no longer exists. It is only known through woodcut illustrations, text descriptions, and the patent specification. Based on this information, I modeled each component in CAD software, extrapolating the measurements from the patent drawings. However, I planned on modifying Martens' design somewhat. First, I wanted to use an electric motor to swing the lens for consistent and repeatable results. The challenge was to calculate the motor speed necessary. I figured that a Petzval portrait lens in good light outdoors would require about a minute to pan across the plate. In other words, about 1/3 of a full revolution in 1 minute. How could I achieve this? A 12-volt, 10 RPM motor coupled to a 30-to-1 reduction gearbox got me in the ballpark. For the option of choosing exposures of 1 or 2 minute duration, I wired the motor with 2 9-volt batteries switched in series or parallel. In the original, seen here in this woodcut, the sensitized plate was affixed to the back of the camera with little toggles. What this means is that the camera had to be loaded with the plate in the darkroom, then transported to the location of the desired view, essentially allowing only one chance for success. I wanted the convenience of a separate plate holder to allow for more than one try. So I modified Martens' design. I built a tambour-style dark slide to transport the sensitized plate separate from the camera. As an aside, notice in the Martens camera that the aperture blades behind the lens are tapered. This is an ingenious way to give less exposure to the sky compared to the foreground and explains how Martens was able to capture clouds. With the camera completed, there was much more work ahead. I had to design, create, and build additional equipment to make a single plate panorama. Here's the complete outfit, including the camera, the dark slide, iodine and bromine boxes, flat plate holder, mercurizer, plate trimmer, buffing support, and plate box. I started this project in December 2018. I worked through the design and construction with extra time during COVID and was able to make my first image in December of 2020. My first result, after 2 years' work, was a complete disaster. The daguerreotype was out of focus, even though it looked quite sharp on the ground glass. I was puzzled. Further research revealed the answer. Martens wrote in 1845, "It is essential that the position of the axis of rotation be determined with perfect accuracy. Otherwise, the image changes its position on the ground glass, and of course also on the plate. All distinctness is then impossible." I wish I had this information at the outset, but I missed it because of a simple typesetting error in Martens' name. I had built my camera based on the patent drawings, which incorrectly showed the pivot axis just behind the front element. To achieve a sharp image, I had to find the precise pivot point. I discovered, by moving the lens back and forth within its mount, that the pivot was nearly 3/4 of an inch off. I was distraught. I felt months of work was wasted. Then I began working on the redesign. I faced some significant problems to salvage my camera. The direct drive motor had to be offset. I fitted a belt drive and tensioner system, but the belt slipped. Additionally, the 1840s Petzval lens I installed had a focal length 3/4 of an inch shorter than the radius of the plate holder, so the image lost sharpness at each end of the plate. I needed an exact focal length of 150 millimeters, so I tried making my own lens by combining a pair of 300 millimeter achromats, but the sharpness was unsatisfactory. Finally, I bought a 150 millimeter Schneider Simar, cut it apart, and fitted the lens elements into a brass barrel to work with the leather front of my camera. And for a secure link between the motor and the lens, I made these 3 tiny gears in steel. My efforts were rewarded with a sharp image. Here is the first successful panoramic daguerreotype. It was taken in our Century Darkroom studio. Working out the exposure was complicated, being indoors in winter with light only coming from the windows. It took 21 full and partial swings of the lens to build up the exposure necessary for the darker side of the studio. You have to understand, I didn't achieve this on the first try. Now I had to learn to work with the camera in the field. Niagara Falls was the obvious choice for my first scenic attempt. Plates were sensitized in a hotel room. There were multiple trips down to the falls with the camera, then uphill to the hotel for developing, fixing, and toning. Here you can see my original precarious gilding setup, which has since been redesigned. Of the 7 plates that day, I kept only 1. And I'm proud to say that the daguerreotype is on permanent display in the Hudson River Gallery upstairs. Thank you. Alan Phillips designed the lighting for it, as well as creating the displays for the scenic daguerreotype. So he's the fellow that needs applause. Working in the field is difficult without a darkroom at hand, so I bought a small trailer that would serve double duty as lodging and a traveling darkroom. In the fall of 2023, we drove to California to teach a workshop at the home of Kara Kuklis, a good friend and accomplished gum over platinum printer. After our workshop, we headed to Yosemite National Park. I had the thrill and privilege of working in a very special place, Ansel Adams' darkroom. From there, we drove out to iconic locations with sensitized plates. Here we are at a location Adams called Gates of the Valley. An umbrella is handy to keep the sun out of the lens. We developed the plates on the spot and then returned to the darkroom to finish them. After gilding and drying this plate, I was overcome with emotion because of the incredible tone and colors of the daguerreotype. Here is the panorama behind hand-painted glass with blue sky, brown rocks, and green values in the trees. It is for me, as Adams said, the equivalent of what I saw and felt. What is interesting is the unique sensation from looking at a panorama made this way. It is not a distorted wide-angle view. The experience is as if you are actually within the scene, taking in all you can see. What I saw was the vastness of Yosemite, carved by glaciers, from my vantage at Olmsted Point. Ansel Adams was inspired by daguerreotypes. He wrote, "I confess that I frequently appraise my work by critical comparison with the daguerreotype image. How urgently I desire to achieve that exquisite tonality and miraculous definition of light and substance in my own print." The site of Clearing Winter Storm, known as Tunnel View, is a magical location. Adams returned to it time and again, as I have. I made this panorama of Tunnel View in the autumn of 2023, and this panorama this year in springtime. I like to think that Frederic Martens would be extremely proud to know that his creative solution to a problem lives on and is appreciated, at least by this Daguerrean. My next dream is to return to Paris, where the camera was conceived to make new panorama daguerreotypes of the city across the Seine. I thank you. So now we have a 15-minute break. I suppose I can entertain a question or two.
Francesco Fragamini, I think I'll speak for everyone when I say massive congratulations on this absolutely incredible accomplishment. Truly amazing, mind-blowing. I'm in awe. I'm always in awe of your brain. I'm wondering if you can talk for a moment about the relationship in a camera that functions the way this one does in terms of your aperture, your f-stop that you're using at any given point in time, how you're thinking about the sensitivity of the plate. And as the examples that you gave working in Yosemite when the weather was maybe colder, drier, versus in a warmer environment, if you're working in a way where you understand that the sensitivity of the plate may have some level of variability, how is the rotational speed of the lens working in concert or against you in those types of situations? Do you follow kind of where my half logic is going with that?
Yeah, kind of, Francis. I understand what you're saying. What I did mention was, you notice in the Von Martens camera, there's aperture blades at the back. I also have those as well. So not only do I have two speeds, I can also tweak the distance between the blades to account for variabilities in lighting.
I've also got a highly technical question. These are curved plates.
Yes.
How do you straighten them out without bending them?
Have you ever bent a saw? My plates are only 20,000ths of an inch thick. They're made the way the 19th century plates were made. And so they bend easily and they return relatively easily. No, they're the same. They're the same.
How do these compare to the panoramic cameras that people used 100 years ago to take those big shots?
Well, in a similar manner, like a flexible film camera, like the wide lux, it's pretty much the same. Well, I think you guys deserve, one last question? Okay, and then we'll take a break.
You better watch it, Mike, with that hat, the beard, and the grin on your face. You're starting to resemble Adams.
Thank you.